Welcome back to More Than Moms. Today, we have an incredible guest and personal friend joining us, Lindsey Metselaar, the voice and creator behind the popular podcast and Instagram account, We Met at Acme. Lindsey is not only a relationship and dating expert, but also a new mom navigating the beautiful, chaotic world of motherhood. In this episode, we'll dive into everything from her TTC journey, transition to motherhood, to her expertise in relationships and intimacy, and how she's balancing it all with her new chapter as a mom. Get ready for an inspiring, real, and relatable conversation. Welcome, Lindsey.
Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
I feel like you have
been in the computer
in my ear for many years of my life, especially my New York days, dating around and all of that. So I am so curious to hear how you have evolved. We met at Acme for so many different stages of your life, from you being single, just got broken up with, and then to being married, now to having a kid. I think a lot of the time we keep things for certain chapters and then they don't come with us for different ones. But it's really amazing to see that you have this like constant stream, and it's been around 7-8 years now.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So yeah, I would love to hear how that evolution has gone for you and how you're still able to be fulfilled by it in such different chapters of your life.
Well, first of all, I just want to say I'm so grateful for you guys, because as a new mom, your platform, I've learned so much from, and your podcast too. Like, I'm obsessed. I have so many good takeaways. I actually have notes from something that you guys said once. Wait, I have to tell you. It was the episode about intimacy.
Oh, yes. And that's something that,
you're the expert.
Yeah, you're the expert on that.
Yeah, but you guys really crush it. You said it's like not even like that profound, but I wrote it down. We can't rely on our desire for intimacy in the same way that we used to.
Yeah,
so true.
And I was just like, damn, that's perfectly put.
That's a thing. Like, I feel like, not to definitely take a listen to the episode if you want to dive in more into that. But I feel like there's so much pressure on us to be perfect in every category. And as we become moms, it's all exacerbated. And it's like, there's so many areas of our life that just gets pushed to the wayside. And we can't simply just live in the moment and feel like, we can just on a whim, like we used to. So we'll definitely get into that, because I do want to hear all your perspective on that as well.
Yes, no, totally. But to answer the question, when I first started We Met at Acme, I was super single. I had just been dumped on my 27th birthday. Actually, funny. So for anyone listening, Dale and I had met when I was in a previous relationship, but Dale was still with her husband at that point, or seeing her husband at that point.
Yeah.
She was dating him. And from that point to, I don't even know, when I started the podcast, I'd already been through 4 guys that I dated. But Dale and Nick stayed strong, which is really cute. Anyway, started the podcast when I was very single. And at that point, it was so natural to me to have a dating podcast, because I was talking about my own experiences. And then I started to get into relationships. And lucky for me and my listeners, it wasn't the one for a little while. And so again, I had more content, more stories. And then I met my husband, and I was kind of having an identity crisis. What am I going to do? Is anyone going to want to listen to someone who's married? But then at the same time, I was like, oh, this legitimizes my dating advice.
Mm-hmm.
It worked, and I found this great guy and this great relationship. And so I kind of just leaned in. And it's funny, because if you think of a lot of your favorite dating podcast hosts, not a lot of them are married. Most are not.
I agree with that.
And I think it keeps them very up to date with what the dating scene is like. And so that definitely was scary for me, but I was like, I'm just going to lean into who I am. I'm married and I'm hoping to have a family. And so I just continued and stayed plugged in to what people are doing in the dating world. I have single friends still, I have single cousins, whatever. And so now I'm kind of talking about the gamut of dating, relationships, marriage, and kids, because the truth is you never stop dating when you're married.
That's a great piece of advice, though, for everyone listening. if you're married with kids, it's hard to keep dating, right? Because your husband, unfortunately, or your partner sometimes becomes something you take for granted, like they're just there and you don't need to go on the date nights and whatnot because so many other priorities seem to get in the way. But the concept of still dating your partner, while it is hard, we need to still do it. And it doesn't have to be these like big things that we used to do and like trips and date nights and whatnot. It can be like a 10-minute walk, or it's just like we put our phone away for X amount of time.
Exactly. Yeah. It doesn't have to be such an event. It's just like recognizing that they're there.
No, I completely agree. And just what we were saying with intimacy, like it makes it so much harder. And sometimes people think once you're married or once you have kids, it brings you even closer together. And in some respects, I think it does. Like you're this family, but also there's a part of you that will sometimes miss the early days and the early stages of when you were first dating or before kids. And there's like this mourning aspect. So how do you find that you personally keep the intimacy and the connection alive for you? And like, do you have any practices that you lean on?
Well, it's funny. I was really worried about it. And I don't know, Dale, if you remember, but we went on a hike/walk in LA and I was pregnant at the time and you had already had your son, Leo. And I was like, what's sex like? Like, are you still having sex? Like, is it different? What, this and that? And you were like, it's actually kind of fine. Like it's not like the same, but it's fine. Like it's still what it is. And I was like, oh my God, she's just like one of the lucky ones. Like there's no way it'll be the same for me. And it is, but it wasn't immediately. I remember when I was first postpartum, I had an emergency C-section. So I was like not in a good place for a while in terms of just moving my body at all. Everything hurt. And then once that pain went away and I got more confident as a parent, as did my husband, and he stopped annoying me as much with like, he's the neurotic one. So once he kind of also got confident, I started to look at him again and be like, oh, like it's about us, like it's not just, it's hard. Amy Schumer has this line that kills me and it's about having sex with her husband. And she's like, we have a kid now. And when people are asking me if I'm having sex with my husband, I'm like, that's my family. Like, that's disgusting. And it's true. Like once you have a kid, it feels like sometimes they're your relatives. So you have to like step away and be like, no, they're actually my romantic interest. And so once I started seeing him like that again, then things just kind of got back to it. And it's not easy. There are some times where I'm very testy or just on edge with him. But the best times are when I get to still see him as my partner. As you said, as you keep dating, a big principle for me is having my own life and having my own plans with friends, like work stuff, and being able to contribute stuff back in as opposed to just talking about our son all the time, which we still obviously are, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's like having, a lot of people refer to it as the roommate phase. And like when you were just talking about how you're like, they're my family. And it's like you get into these defined roles and it's very common, especially in the newborn phase, to be in this roommate phase. And a lot of people, for some people, it may end after a couple months. Some people, they might go to their 6-week appointment, like, great, I'm cleared, let's go. Other people might be like, I am nowhere near ready. Like, I wasn't ready at 6 weeks. So getting out of that roommate phase, like, would you say you kind of knew about it? Was there anything that you would have done differently?
I did know about it. And I was one of those crazy people who did have sex at 6 weeks. Like that night that I got cleared. And let me tell you guys, I didn't want to, but I was like, I need to do this because it's going to remind me that like of the love, and I wasn't forced in any way. I wasn't pressured in any way. I wanted to. And obviously big mistake because you know how painful that is, but not really big mistake because it brought that connection back. And then even though I didn't enjoy it for like the first month, maybe month and a half, it was a very nice way to get back into a routine of connection. And I'm not saying like if there's a mom listening being like, oh my God, I'm at my 6 weeks. There's no way. Like, don't. Don't. There's no reason to. And your partner will wait until you're ready. And mine would have too. But I was just like, I feel like I should try to exercise this muscle again.
No, it's so well put.
Yeah.
Yeah. But so a lot of people will write in and say like, maybe I want to be intimate with my partner, but like, I just don't feel good in my body, like body image. It takes a while to get it back. So what would you say to someone who's just really dealing with confidence issues and that's kind of like the blocker to get intimate?
I think that is so relatable. And I definitely didn't feel good in my body at 6 weeks. But part of it is like, at least with my husband, he was so kind about making me feel comfortable and confident and sexy, even though like I knew that I didn't look it. He was just like, you look amazing, this and that. So I think it's important to make sure that your partner is your biggest hype. And then also, if you're not feeling confident in your body, then like, I know this sounds crazy, but just like turn the lights off and just kind of go somewhere else. Like it's a mind thing. It's not about how you look. It's about how you're feeling and like that mind part of it, at least for women to have an orgasm, like it's all in our head, I think. So just try as best you can to get out of your head. And if you can't, it goes back to like, don't do it yet. If your feeling about how you look is going to hold you back from actually having any enjoyment from it, then don't do it.
Do you feel like you're a lot more intentional with the intimacy now than you were maybe before a child? And then also, is there other than sex, like is there other ways that you feel like you are intimate with your husband now?
Definitely. In terms of intention, no, I honestly don't think I'm more intentional. I think if the moment is right, then it's happening. But I've never really been like, let's meet at 6 p.m. next Wednesday. Like, let's intend to frolic in the bedroom. Like, that's just not my vibe. But it's more like, and I'm very traditional. I prefer that he's the one that initiates. Mm-hmm. I don't know. It's like, why should I initiate if I could just read, But if he does and it feels good, like, it's like working out for me in a lot of ways. Like I'm not dying to do it necessarily, but then after it, I'm feeling so good and I have endorphins and I feel better. It's not necessarily intentional, but I wouldn't shy away from it because I know that the connection is worth it in the end. But as you mentioned, and you talked about this in your episode too, there's so many other ways to be intimate now. Simply just like being next to each other in bed reading is honestly very intimate to me. I think getting through something like our first trip with our son on a plane brings a lot of intimacy because you're like, wow, we were just a really good team together. Mm-hmm. And I feel closer to you than ever. Or just like, I don't know, last night we were on a double date and we met at the restaurant because I was coming from home and he was coming from his office. And I looked at him across the table and I was like, you look so handsome. And like those little moments are also intimacy. It doesn't have to be in the bedroom, touching, being sexual. It could be in the little things, like in the sweet comments, like grabbing their hand, a hug. And I think you guys talked about that really well.
Yeah, it's so true. And I feel like it can be something that we forget about when we have kids because sometimes we get into these habits, the roommate phase, or like we get resentful if our husband was 1 minute late coming through the door when we needed help for bath time. And a lot of these moments that we didn't have pre-kids really can make the tension stronger and us less willing to open up. And it can kind of close, like put a gap or a wedge in a relationship. And that's why I think a lot of people do struggle that first year after having a kid. And it's like, they're just trying to get through it. But if you looked back at yourself dating in your dating era and you had the wisdom you do now about a partner and like maybe some advice or what you would look for in a partner, like what would you say, having gone through having a kid with your partner, qualities you would look for and things that are important to you?
The number one thing for me now looking back is, and I'm grateful that my husband is like this, you need to be with someone who puts you first. Someone who isn't the one who it's all about them and like you're catering to them. You know those kinds of husbands. But it has to be someone who's willing to run to the supermarket in the middle of the night because you got your period and you need Midol and tampons or whatever it is, or goes and gets you water from your water bottle even after they've just sat down. Like that's the person that you're looking for if you want to have kids and start a family with someone. I never, ever pictured any of my exes as fathers, like as dads. I just thought of them as boyfriends. I was looking for like a swaggy, like cool kind of guy, not someone who would be a good parent. And I'm so happy that I didn't look for that when it came to Steven, my husband, but that was the mistake that I was making. So I would say if you're in the dating phase and you're like looking for someone to start a family with, you have to find someone that truly puts your needs in front of them and their needs, because that's how they're going to be with your child too. They're going to put you and your child before them. And that's the best kind of husband.
I love that. I want to ask you if you agree with this advice that both Dale and I received. We were both told that even once you have kids, your number one priority is your husband or your partner because you guys are laying the foundation for your future family. Would you agree with that?
100,000%. My parents always told me that. And it's hard to hear this. And a lot of moms are like, that's not true. Not when your kids are young. They really need you. And it's like, yeah, of course your kids need you. But what they need more is a model of an incredibly healthy and happy relationship. And if you can work on that first, then they'll have so much more happiness than you realize.
Yeah, they need a stable, safe, comfort, like all of those type of things at home. In my opinion, they need to really succeed in their life.
It's true.
So you talk openly also about your fertility journey, trying to conceive. How is that process for you? I think there are so many moms in our community who are dealing with this right now. And I think your advice would be incredibly helpful, and also like your journey and how you processed it and went through the motions.
Yeah. So I went off birth control. I wanted to go off before my wedding. And my OB at the time was like, don't do it. You're going to regret it. Maybe you'll get pregnant before your wedding. And then you're not going to have like the body that you want at your wedding. And there was just all these people telling me what to do. And I wish that at some point in my life, I had gone off birth control to see if I ovulated and got my period. But I never did that. I was on birth control consistently, never off of it from age 15. So when I went off a month after my wedding and I didn't get my period, I was like, oh my God, I'm pregnant. Like, I'm so lucky. I'm just one of the lucky ones, like pregnant night of my wedding. And it didn't even occur to me that something could be wrong with my body. And so then the next month came, didn't get my period again. I'm like, oh, I'm pregnant. Like it just took 2 months. Like, I don't know why I was so optimistic and delusional. And it just kept happening. And I was like, oh, I'm pregnant. And I wasn't. And then I was like, okay, I'm clearly just not getting my period. And so I went to my OB and I was like, what's the deal? I'm not getting my period. And she was like, sometimes it takes up to a year to get your period after going off birth control. And I was like, I don't buy it. But again, I was like, I'll give it a couple more months. 6 months out from going off birth control, still no period, still no pregnancy. And so I was like, something is off. And she was like, I don't think so. I don't think it's off, but here's a fertility place. So I went somewhere and it was a very large fertility place that everyone's heard of. And they kind of like pack you in like sardines. And it was very like robotic. All of the things, I came in, I did tests. They were like, oh, IUI or triggered ovulation, this, that, and this. So I ended up triggering to make myself ovulate. And at that point, you then have to have sex within 72 hours or something. And that ruined sex for my relationship for that like next few months. And so sex would be like a forced thing, a timed thing. And it didn't work. We did 3 months of timed ovulation, like triggered ovulation, and then timed sex. And then nothing happened. So I was pretty bummed. And I decided to get a second opinion, which is my biggest advice for anyone going through any sort of fertility journey. Always get a second opinion. Even if things are going well for you, get a second opinion in life, honestly. And I got a second opinion. I went to this smaller fertility place. It's called Spring Fertility. I'll say it because I love them. And immediately my doctor, Dr. Fisher, told me that I had PCOS. She was like, it's textbook PCOS. Your ultrasound shows all of the cysts on your ovaries. And this is why you're not ovulating. And I was like, oh my God, this is crazy. I honestly felt like a PCOS diagnosis was like a cancer diagnosis. I was so dramatic about it. Looking back, I'm so grateful I had a reason that something was happening or not happening to my body. And I'm so grateful that I had a plan at that point. And then mixed with some genetic stuff that we had, we made the decision to do IVF. And that was probably like a year and a half after going off birth control. And then we just got right to it. And IVF was the best decision we ever made. Unfortunately, it wasn't covered by insurance. And that's like the worst, part of it. But within, I would say 3 or 4 months, we were pregnant.
Wow. Yeah. Like hearing people's stories, everyone has such a different story. And I think that there's also a lot of stigma around it. Like people don't share when they're going through fertility struggles and they feel very isolated, very alone. And people usually only come out and talk about it after they've fallen pregnant. And they're just like for a year and a half, you must have felt isolated. And how was that for you? Like feeling,
and your mental health.
And your mental health.
It was so hard. And it's such a catch-22 because you're right. People don't really share until after, but you also can't share during because you don't know how your journey is going to end. And it's such a vulnerable thing and place to be, especially if you have a following on social media. You don't want to go out there being like, I'm not getting pregnant and it's really hard. And then like get pregnant the next day. There was one influencer that talked about her infertility 2 months into not getting pregnant and then got pregnant the 3rd month. And I think everyone who had gone through a journey was like very offended by that, rightfully so. And so I don't think that you can talk about something like that until you're past it. And that does make it really isolating. And I was really hurting because, we were getting FaceTimes from our friends announcing their pregnancies. And we were just surrounded by happy baby related news. And then I didn't know that anyone else was struggling either. And it turned out I had had friends who were. And so it was definitely lonely. And because of that, I actually started a fertility WhatsApp group for people in the process. And no one knows each other really. And so it's a very good, safe space that has been helpful to people, thank God. And I wish I'd had it when I was going through it. There are Reddit threads and things like that, but you don't, again, know how your journey is going to end. So you don't appreciate people being like, oh, it's going to be amazing. Like, I see you, your next transfer working, or I see this, or like I had all these problems and now I have 2 babies. Like, I didn't want to hear that because I was like, I don't know what how my story ends. I would rather just hear people being like, oh, I'm doing the shots right now, or I'm just wherever I was at.
How did you take care of your mental health through all of that?
Therapy was huge for me. Working out, moving my body was a big thing. I tried to travel as much as possible. I would always have, this is a really important thing if you're going through a fertility journey, especially if you're going through multiple rounds of IVF or IUI, whatever it is, have a plan to do something that you wouldn't be able to do if you were pregnant after
like eat
the
sushi
thing. So
and drink.
Exactly. So if you are doing a transfer and you're like, obviously I hope it works, but if it doesn't work, I'm going to go to Japan. Or if it doesn't work, I'm going to get Botox. Or if it doesn't work, simply like I'm going to go eat sushi, or I'm going to have a deli meat sandwich. Whatever it is, it doesn't have to be so grand, but just have something that you can do for you that someone who's pregnant actually wouldn't be able to do. So like, that's cool for you. And then also you have something to look forward to.
Yeah, I think what's really interesting that you brought up, your number one piece of advice is always get a second opinion. And I think it's actually been a common thread from so many people that we've spoken to. It's almost like there's this like abyss where you go of, you're trying to get pregnant. You go to like the doctor that's on Instagram, or you go in, you're kind of treated like sardines, as you said, you're just a number. And then you kind of start believing whatever they say. And without a second opinion, like even your OB could have probably told you had PCOS, right? So like, where do you think there's this gap? And like, what do you feel like our system really needs to address? Because for so many people, they have the exact same issue, whether it's for fertility or even like surrogacy. There's so many different ways that people are getting pregnant now, but when they go into like the kind of mainstream approach, a lot of the time they're being treated just like everyone else. And we're all unique in our own ways. And we all have unique reasons why we're not getting pregnant. We can't just be treated like everyone else.
Well, the problem is that your OB or even your fertility doctor at one of those big places isn't concerned with the root cause of why you're not getting pregnant. Their job is to get you pregnant or to deal with you once you're pregnant. And so they're just like, how do we get from A to B as soon as possible? Whereas someone who genuinely cares about you and wants to fix the thing underneath is going to be like, here's something that you need to change about your diet, or you need to change about your hormones, or whatever it is that's the reason. And then let's work on getting you pregnant. But most people don't have time for that. Most doctors are just like, all right. And in
Treating
their defense, they don't have the ability to have the time for that, right? Because they have 100 people on their schedule a day and they're just like churning them out. So they're like, okay, she's not getting pregnant. Yeah, maybe her ultrasound looks like PCOS, but like, I'm not going to tell her that because I know how to get her pregnant. I just need to give her X, Y, and Z. And that's what's on their mind.
I also think it's to do a lot with the insurance companies, because I switched my OB from my first pregnancy to this pregnancy, and I'm treated like completely different in this practice. If I need to spend an hour with him, he's spending an hour with me. And if he's late, that's great. My other doctor, while I loved him, it was a machine, that office. It's like they needed to spin you in and out. And they're again, like diagnosing the quick problem and like on to the next. And I think my doctor now doesn't take insurance. And yes, it's very privileged of me to be able to go to someone like that. But at the same time, I feel like he truly cares about me and my well-being and like the unique things that are going on in my body versus treating for, the mainstream.
Yeah. And you bring up such a good point. It really is a privilege to have good healthcare, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
And most people aren't able to do that. So these places where you're treated like sardines, that's the best you're going to get for what your insurance can cover. And so if you find a doctor who's really, and you still can find a really great doctor who takes insurance. The second place I went to does take my insurance. It was just a smaller place with better doctors who actually care. And that's why getting the second opinion is so important, because even at this big place that I mentioned that I went to first, there are great doctors. I just didn't have one.
Yeah, the second opinion thing really resonates with me. And even sometimes more, a third opinion if you're still not satisfied. And sometimes if you're like, okay, I've gone to 4 doctors, 3 of them tell me this, and 1 of them says this, I'm going to go with, the fact that most of them are in this camp. I'm going to lead with that result. I had to deal with that for like my son's issues. And yeah, it's definitely like the whole medical system and putting trust into your care team is so important. So a big theme for us at More Than Moms and our community is identity. And we call it the postpartum identity crisis. For some people, it's career, it's friendships, it's all the above. And having gone through this big life transition, especially as someone who is a social media content creator, what was the identity change for you? Or did you really feel a big shift with career? I know you spoke a bit about that. Friendships and professionally, personally.
I definitely felt it. I did an episode just being like, I have no idea what to do now. And I think it's really normal to feel that way, no matter what you do. But I feel good now. And I feel like I'm doing what I should be doing. I just needed to find out what direction to go in. And by the way, it's still not perfect. I have so many different Instagram accounts it's like I have 100 personalities, like my mom thing, my dating thing. And I never merged, but it's just what feels right to me. I just like to keep it separate. And my crisis was kind of, do I need to just bring it all together? And I think, Dale, you can probably relate to this because you have Sweats and you have More Than Moms, and then you just have, Dale. And it's hard. You're like, what should I be putting my energy into? And you also don't want to spam one account with like your mom stuff. It's difficult. But I think as long as you're showing up and being true to yourself on every channel as a social media, content creator, then I think that's all you can do. And having a podcast has been great for me because I can at least talk about this crisis and be very candid and be like, if it seems kind of all over the place, it's because it is, like that's kind of what life is right now. And I will say one thing that Instagram has been great at helping is like this collab post thing, So if